plans. He came home to his kids every evening, and he believed, the way you believe in things you've put your full weight on and found solid, that showing up, quietly and without complaint, was enough to hold a life together. He had built that belief the same way he built everything else, one honest day at a time. What he didn't know on that Tuesday evening in late October was that the life he believed in had been quietly taken apart from the inside, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, for over 2 years. That the woman he had married, the woman whose name he had given his children, had already decided exactly how this would end. She had been planning it since before their youngest could walk. He was the last one to know. He was always going to be the last one to know. Because men like Desmond don't go looking for exits. They assume the door is still open. Aurora, Colorado sits about 16 miles east of Denver, where on clear days the Rocky Mountains stretch along the western horizon like a long, jagged purple line that has a way of making your problems feel temporary. October air in Colorado has a particular quality, clean and sharp, like the sky has just been scraped down to nothing and started over. The mountains were catching the last of the light when Desmond pulled his truck onto Birchwood Court that evening. He sat in the cab for a moment before going in. He'd developed this habit without meaning to, just a breath or two of quiet before walking into the noise and warmth of a house with a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl in it. Jalen would be at the kitchen table right now, pretending to do homework while actually drawing basketball plays in the margins of his notebook. Faith would be on the living room rug in her butterfly dress, organizing something. Toy horses, probably, or those small plastic figures she carried everywhere in a Ziploc bag like they were classified documents. He smiled, just thinking about it, grabbed his work bag, walked up to the front door. That's when he saw it. Destiny's phone was lying screen up on the kitchen counter, visible through the front window. He saw it light up as he turned his key in the lock. One name on the screen, Devin, and below it, 4 words of a message preview before the screen went dark. Can't wait. Tonight's perfect. He didn't pick up the phone. He didn't need to. Destiny came out of the bedroom a moment later in a red dress, fitted, low-backed, expensive, lipstick on, clutch already in hand. She stopped when she saw his face. She read it the way a person reads a room they've walked into, slightly too confident. For just a moment, something in her expression recalculated. Then it smoothed over. And she made a decision. Desmond could see her make it, to go on offense rather than retreat. "Before you say anything," she said, her voice carrying the particular calm of someone who has rehearsed this, "you can just accept this, Desmond. Devin and I are having dinner tonight. A lot of couples in Denver live this way. I need space. I need to feel seen. You come home from a job site every night and you talk about concrete and load-bearing walls, and I have been disappearing inside this house for 2 years." She reached past him for the car keys on the hook by the door. "So you can accept it, or you can make this ugly. But if you make it ugly, I will make sure you regret it. I'll say you have a temper, that you're not safe around these children. I will leave this marriage with this house, with Jalen and Faith, and with your name in the ground." She held his gaze for 1 more second, then picked up the clutch and walked past him toward the front door. Desmond stood still. He was aware of the television in the next room, a cartoon, bright voices, a laugh track. Jalen and Faith, 10 feet away. He was aware that his right thumb had pressed hard against the side of his index finger, the way it always did when something hit him harder than he was braced for. He was aware that his next breath came in slower than normal, and that the room had a specific quality he would remember for the rest of his life. The click of her heels crossed the porch. The car door opened and closed. The engine turned over and faded down Birchwood Court. And Desmond Reed stood alone in his own hallway, listening to his children's cartoon playing in the next room, and understood. Not with panic, not with rage, but with the cold clarity of a man whose instincts have just been confirmed. That Destiny had not lost control of herself tonight. She had decided that being caught slightly off guard was the right moment to establish dominance. She thought the threat would shut him down. She had used smaller versions of it before, a comment about his temperament to her mother, a suggestion in an argument that he was too intense, and it had always worked. He had always softened, always adjusted, because he was the kind of man who chose de-escalation. And she had read that over years as a ceiling on his resistance. She had just made the first serious miscalculation of her strategy. Because there is a difference between a man who backs down because he cannot handle conflict and a man who backs down because he is already thinking 3 moves ahead. He went to the living room and sat between Jalen and Faith on the couch. Faith leaned against his arm without looking up from the screen. Jalen handed him a throw pillow without being asked, because that was their routine. Desmond put the pillow behind his back and stayed there until both kids were in bed. Then he sat down at the kitchen table, opened his laptop, and started looking. Stay with us, because what Desmond found in those accounts 11 minutes later is the moment this story stops being about a marriage and becomes something much darker. $68,400, moved in careful, measured increments across 11 months, $3,000 in November, $5,000 in January, nothing in February, $8,000 in March, transferred to an LLC he had never heard of, Lang Property Solutions, registered in Denver, Devin Lang, sole member. Desmond closed the laptop slowly, set both hands flat on the table. $23,000 of that money had come directly from the materials budget for the Arkans court renovation in the Rhino District, the contract he had personally guaranteed with his professional license. Here is what made it possible. 3 years earlier, when Desmond's project load had grown past the point where he could manage field operations and administrative accounting at the same time, Destiny had offered to take over the business's back office. Invoicing, vendor payments, payroll coordination, accounts payable. It had made complete sense. She had a business degree, she was detail-oriented, she was home in the afternoons. He had been grateful. He had trusted her completely with it. What he had actually done was hand her the keys to the building and then stayed at the job site while she went through every room. He called Marcus Hale at 11:43 p.m. Marcus was Desmond's cousin on his father's side, 38, former Denver PD, now running a private investigation firm off South Broadway. The kind of man who answered on the second ring regardless of the hour. The kind of calm that isn't the absence of feeling, but the presence of discipline. That same night, on Marcus's immediate advice, Desmond called his attorney, Patricia Owens, a family law specialist in Cherry Creek. He described the confrontation. He described Destiny's exact words about the children. He described what he'd found in the accounts. Patricia was quiet for several seconds. Then, the threat she made about the children, can you document it in any way? I can state it under oath, and I have her messages to Devin on a shared phone account. That may be enough for an emergency filing, she said. I want everything you have by 7 tomorrow morning. Patricia filed an emergency ex parte motion for temporary custody the following day, citing documented threats regarding the children's welfare and the ongoing financial irregularities discovered in the business accounts. Under Colorado law, CRS Section 14-10-108, the Arapahoe County Court granted the order within 36 hours. Desmond had the signed paperwork in his hand by Thursday afternoon. He did not move the children until Monday morning. He waited those 2 days deliberately, because Patricia had told him to, and because a man who has been careful his entire life does not abandon that carefulness at the moment it matters most. In the meantime, Marcus began working quietly. He pulled public records on Lang Property Solutions. He reviewed the transaction logs Desmond provided from the business accounts, all material Desmond had full legal right to access. He brought in a forensic accountant from Cherry Creek to document the pattern. What they found was a financial architecture so deliberate it almost had a personality. Destiny had been moving money since the previous November. The transfers were calibrated, never large enough to trigger the informal threshold of concern, always routed through accounts she controlled at arm's length through Devon. She had watched her husband closely enough to know exactly which lines he reviewed and exactly which ones he trusted without auditing. One evening, Marcus played Desmond a recording. "Before you listen," Marcus said, "I want you to understand why this is legally clean. Destiny made this call on a three-way line. My contact was already on the call with Devon, discussing a separate referral matter, when Destiny joined and shifted the conversation. My contact is the third party. He consented to preserve the recording on his end. Under Colorado's one-party consent statute, that makes it fully admissible." Patricia's office has already reviewed the chain of custody. He pressed play. Destiny's voice came through clearly, light, confident, relaxed. "Desmond never audits the materials line carefully. He trusts me completely. As long as we keep the transfers under $5,000 at a time, he won't notice until we're ready for him to notice." Desmond listened to it twice, set the phone down on the table. "She studied how I run the business," he said. His voice was flat. "She studied everything about you," Marcus said, "for a long time. Probably from before you knew anything was wrong." The truck Destiny drove daily, a 2019 Nissan Pathfinder, was still registered in both their names. Joint property, jointly titled. Marcus had confirmed with Patricia's office that a joint owner in Colorado has the legal right to monitor property in which they hold title. He attached a GPS unit to the undercarriage on a Tuesday evening while the vehicle sat on the street in front of the house. 4 days after Desmond brought the kids to the cabin near Estes Park, Destiny found it. Marcus called at 6:14 in the morning. "She found the unit on the Pathfinder Wednesday evening," he said. "And here is what she did next. She drove to Devon's building on Spear Boulevard and made a call from inside his apartment, from his landline. She thought she was clean. No connection to her number, no record on her phone. But Devon's building runs a shared line system. My contact had access to outbound call logs from that unit, and Devon himself was on the call, which means the recording is one-party consent, legally obtained, fully documented." "What did she say?" Desmond asked. Marcus played it, her voice, calm, practical, precise. The voice of someone taking a step they had already thought through completely. "Desmond has the truck tracked. We have to move before he builds a complete file. I'll set the scene at the house on Birchwood Court, Saturday evening. Make it look like he came back and it got physical. Devon, I need you there as the witness who calls it in." Desmond sat with that for a long moment. She had gone to a different building, a different phone, a different number. She had been careful. And she had still left a thread. That is the fatal flaw in any plan that depends on controlling every variable. The longer the plan runs, the more variables accumulate. Destiny had been managing this operation for over 2 years. She was tired. She was rattled. And people who have been in control for a long time, when they feel that control beginning to slip, do not slow down. They accelerate. And acceleration is where mistakes live. Destiny had been planning this for over 2 years, studying her husband, moving money, preparing her story, while Desmond came home every single night believing his marriage was intact. Could you have stayed as calm as he did when you found out? Yes or no in the comments. Or has someone ever used your trust as the weapon against you? Tell us below. Stay with us, because what Destiny said on that phone call is the moment this story stops being about betrayal and becomes something far darker. Marcus stopped the recording. The cabin was quiet. Through the window, the aspen trees along the ridge above Estes Park stood in the thin October light, their leaves already turned gold and amber and trembling slightly in a wind Desmond couldn't hear from inside. What you just heard is not a woman reacting in fear. It is not desperation. What you heard is the deliberate, premeditated construction of a false crime scene, what law enforcement professionals and family court specialists call fabricated victim positioning. The goal is surgical. Manufacture evidence of a crime that did not occur, then occupy the victim position before the truth can catch up. It weaponizes the very institutions designed to protect people. And Destiny had chosen to attempt it against the father of her children, using the children themselves as the mechanism. Desmond sat with it for a moment. She was going to frame me, he said, not with outrage, just with the particular flatness of a man naming something he now understands completely. Yes, Marcus said, and she was 72 hours away from doing it. He slid a folder across the table. Patricia's office has already logged both recordings with the court. The forensic account summary is attached. Everything is time-stamped and notarized. We're not building a case anymore, Desmond. The case is built. 2 days later, Destiny called the Aurora Police Department. She reported that Desmond had taken the children without her knowledge or consent. She used the word abducted. She had either pieced together or been told the address of the cabin near Estes Park because she gave the Larimer County Sheriff's Office an exact location. 2 deputies arrived on a Tuesday morning. Desmond was at the kitchen table with the kids when the knock came. Jalen looked up from the card game he and Faith had been playing. Faith went very still, a card suspended halfway to the discard pile. "It's okay," Desmond said, quiet and even. The same tone he used for everything that mattered. "You two stay right here." He opened the door. 2 officers, professional. And behind them, on the gravel path leading to the cabin, where she had no legal basis to be, was Destiny. She had driven the 3 hours from Aurora. She stood in a cream-colored jacket and sunglasses, arms folded, watching. Here is what that image reveals. Destiny had not come primarily because she expected to win on legal merits. She had come to be witnessed. In her operating model, the person who presents most convincingly as the wronged party is the person the system protects. She needed an audience, the officers, the optics of a concerned mother arriving to retrieve her children. What she had not once seriously considered was the possibility that Desmond might have spent the previous week building something she could not perform her way around. Marcus stepped out from the interior hallway. Desmond handed the lead deputy the temporary custody order, signed by an Arapahoe County judge 4 days prior, predating this complaint by 96 hours. Then the second document, a notarized, formally logged copy of Destiny's recorded phone call, with the complete chain of custody declaration already attached and initialed by Patricia Owens. The deputy reviewed both documents carefully, looked up. "Sir, I want to be precise about the situation. You have a valid ex parte temporary custody order issued prior to this complaint. The children are with their custodial parent, as defined by this order. There is no actionable basis for the report as filed." He paused, not for effect, just the natural pause of a professional being exact. "I'd also advise the complainant that filing a false police report in Colorado is a serious offense under state law, and that if the recording referenced in this file is what it appears to be, the district attorney's office may have independent interest in reviewing it." Destiny's jaw tightened. Her arms stayed folded. Behind the sunglasses, something that had been certain went very quiet. She had come with a performance prepared. She had a version of this scene in her head, the distressed mother, the absent father, the children caught in the middle. And she had been ready to deliver it. There was no surface left to deliver it to. Psychologists call this Narcissistic collapse. Not the dramatic kind, not tears and screaming, but a specific interior failure that occurs when a person who has built their entire strategy around controlling how they are perceived encounters a context they cannot reframe. The script she'd prepared has no traction. The narrative has no place to land. What remains is only the actual situation, stripped of every layer she'd constructed around it. And the actual situation is that she is standing on a gravel path in the Colorado mountains while an officer reads her own words back to her in front of witnesses. There is nothing left to say that helps. She turned, walked back to her car, got in. The engine turned over. The car moved down the mountain road and disappeared around the bend. Desmond watched until it was gone. Then he heard Faith's voice from the kitchen, small and careful. "Is Daddy okay?" And Jalen, 9 years old, his father's stillness already sitting naturally in his face, answered without hesitation. "Dad's always okay." Pause on that for just a moment. A child doesn't say that about a man he has watched panic. He doesn't say it about a man who raises his voice when things go wrong, or disappears under pressure, or needs to be reassured. He says it because he has watched, day after day, what it looks like when a man chooses not to fall apart. And that image has become his definition of what safe feels like. Desmond had never sat Jalen down and explained resilience. He had simply demonstrated it, without announcement, every single day. That is the inheritance no court order can touch. The deputies left. Marcus began making calls. And somewhere on that mountain road headed back toward Aurora, the plan Destiny had spent 2 years building was coming apart in ways she could feel, but couldn't yet fully see. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Marcus had already found something else. Something sitting in a cloud archive she had never cleared, from a phone she had replaced more than 2 years ago. Something that didn't just expose what she had done to Desmond. It explained why she had married him in the first place. Don't go anywhere, because the recording Marcus found next is the moment everything you thought you understood about this marriage gets completely rewritten. 3 months passed. They passed slowly, not easily, but steadily, the way time moves when the emergency is over and ordinary life begins reasserting itself with the quiet insistence of something that has been waiting at the door. Desmond and the kids settled into a new house in the Saddle Rock neighborhood of Aurora. Corner lot, 2 juniper trees in the backyard, a porch wide enough for 2 chairs. Within 4 minutes of walking through the front door for the first time, Jalen had claimed the larger bedroom. Within 10, Faith had asked about painting her wall lavender. Desmond said yes to both. He returned to the Arkans Court project in Rhino, which had been paused and then carefully resumed after the forensic accounting report was submitted to the court. Lang Property Solutions had been referred to the Denver District Attorney's Office. Devin Lang had retained a private attorney and, by all available indicators, had stopped responding to Destiny's calls entirely. The divorce proceedings moved through the system. Destiny had fought hard in the opening sessions. Then, less hard. Then, when the cabin recording was formally admitted into evidence and the full scope of the financial disclosures became clear, her attorney, a sharp, realistic woman from a firm on 17th Street, had advised her client on what was salvageable. What was salvageable was not much. Destiny accepted the settlement terms in January. The paperwork was finalized by March 14th, an accelerated resolution her attorney's office had acknowledged, but the math of contesting it further simply didn't work in her favor. Desmond did not attend the final hearing. His attorney handled it. He was at the job site that morning, walking a fresh foundation with his foreman in the thin March light, marking measurements in chalk on new concrete. He felt, in those weeks, not triumphant. He felt tired. The particular tiredness of a man who has spent months dismantling something he spent years believing in. He went to work. He picked up the kids. He made dinner. He slept. He was almost okay. Marcus called on a Thursday evening in late January at 7:43 p.m. Desmond was standing at the kitchen counter in his work clothes, a glass of water in his hand. Outside, the first real snow of the season had begun to fall over Aurora. Soft, unhurried, the kind of snow that doesn't announce itself. "I need you to sit down," Marcus said. Desmond sat. During the formal discovery process, Destiny's attorney was required to disclose all cloud-based storage accounts associated with her devices. One of those accounts, tied to a phone she replaced over 2 years ago, had never been cleared. "Desmond, there's a voice recording in that archive. Date stamp puts it at 2 years and 3 months ago." Desmond did the arithmetic without trying. 2 years and 3 months ago. Faith had been 3. Jalen had been 6. It was the year they had repainted the house on Birchwood Court. Desmond on the ladder with a roller, Jalen stationed below passing him supplies with the focused seriousness of a 9-year-old who believed this was a real job. The year Destiny had made a birthday cake for his mother that came out slightly lopsided on one side, and everyone at the table ate every crumb of it and said it was perfect. The year he had looked at his life and believed, without any particular evidence to the contrary, that things were good. He had believed it completely. "Play it," he said. 2 voices. Destiny first, then her mother, Grace. A woman Desmond had known for a decade, who had sat at his Thanksgiving table, who had watched his children take their first steps, who had told him on 3 separate occasions over the years that he was a good man. Destiny, relaxed and matter-of-fact. "Mama, I can't keep doing this. Desmond is just, he's so steady. Construction sites and school pickups and making sure everyone's okay. That's his entire world. Devin actually wants to go somewhere. Devin has ambition." Grace, careful. "Baby, Desmond has been good to this family. He helped your uncle out of that situation 2 years back. He's always—" "I know what he's been, Mama. That's the whole reason this is going to work. Because he's decent. Because he trusts me without question. I'm going to stay another year, maybe 2, long enough to establish a financial position and build enough documentation around the house. Then I'll say he scared me, that I was afraid in my own home. He won't fight it. He won't even know where to start." Grace, quieter. "But he's never once raised a hand. That's exactly the point. Nobody questions a woman who says she was afraid. Nobody asks for proof when the story sounds right." A pause. The sound of something set down on a counter. Grace again, after a long moment. "But the babies, Destiny. You had babies with this man." Destiny, without hesitation. "Devin actually said that was the smartest part. A mother with 2 young children is untouchable in family court, Mama. No Colorado judge gives primary custody to the father when the mother has been the primary caregiver. Having Jalen and Faith doesn't complicate the plan. They're the foundation of it." Silence. Then Grace, very low. "Destiny, if you ever..." "Destiny, if you ever say a word to anyone, to Desmond, to his family, to anyone, I will move, and you will never see those babies again. You know I mean it." A longer silence. Grace, barely audible. "I know." The recording stopped. Desmond did not move. What he had just heard has a name in the clinical literature on long-term relational betrayal. A predatory, intimate partnership. A relationship entered into and maintained not out of genuine feeling, but as a vehicle for a predetermined outcome. The people most vulnerable to this pattern are those who lead with complete trust, who extend to others the same standard they hold themselves to. In Destiny's own words, he trusted her without question. She did not say this with guilt. She said it as an architectural feature of her plan. And the children. She had calculated that having them would strengthen her legal position, the warmth Desmond believed he had witnessed in her as a mother, The birthday cakes, the bedtime routines, the way she had held Faith as an infant, all of it existed inside a frame he had never been shown. That is the part that is almost impossible to absorb. The tears came without warning, not dramatically, they simply arrived, the way water moves across glass, slow and inevitable. He did not wipe them. He sat in the kitchen on Saddle Rock Drive, the snow still falling outside, and thought about 10 years of mornings, about the lopsided cake, about the night Faith was born, and how Destiny had cried in the delivery room, and how completely he had believed in what those tears meant. He thought about what it means to love something that was never entirely there. He thought about that for a long time. Then, after a silence that stretched out past measuring, he said something, quietly, more to himself than to Marcus. She was winning for a long time, but I chose not to lose. There is a meaningful difference between those two statements. Losing means being diminished by what happened, becoming smaller, colder, more closed than you were before. Choosing not to lose means deciding, in full knowledge of everything, to remain the person you set out to be. It is not the same as winning, it is quieter than that, and it lasts longer. What Desmond did next, in that kitchen, in that silence, is the moment the entire story turns. Don't go anywhere. He sat with it for 3 days. He didn't call anyone, didn't bring it up in therapy or replay it for anyone who hadn't already been there for it. He carried the knowledge the way he had carried other heavy things, quietly, with both hands, without setting it down in the road. On the evening of the second day, alone at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep, he asked himself the question he had been holding at arm's length since the recording stopped. Should I have seen it? He sat with that honestly. He thought about the signs. The laptop closed too quickly when he walked into the room. The evenings that ran longer than the explanation given. The one time at a movie theater he had reached for her hand, and she had let it rest in his without returning the pressure. He had noticed those things. He had filed them away under, "She's going through something, give her space." He had been wrong about what they meant. He had not been wrong to extend her that grace. There is a difference between missing the truth and being systematically deceived about it. Missing it is a failure of perception. Being deceived about it is something that was done to you, by someone who made that deception their deliberate, sustained project. He had not been blind. He had been lied to, precisely and patiently, by someone who had decided years ago that his trust was the most useful thing about him. He picked up his glass, drank, set it down. That's enough, he thought. Not as suppression, as a genuine conclusion. He had looked at the question with open eyes and arrived at an honest answer. He didn't need to keep returning to it. He went to bed. On the third day, he took Jalen and Faith to Washington Park in Denver, because the snow had stopped and the February sky had gone that particular shade of blue that makes Colorado look like a painting someone made on an optimistic day. Jalen ran ahead toward the lake. Faith held Desmond's hand and walked at the pace of someone who intends to notice everything. The geese along the frozen shoreline, the bare-branched cottonwoods, 2 dogs in matching sweaters being walked by a man who appeared to take this very seriously. "Daddy," Faith said, "do you think geese have feelings?" Desmond looked at the geese, moving along the ice with considerable personal dignity. "I think they have strong opinions," he said. "Whether those qualify as feelings, I'm not entirely sure." Faith considered this for several steps. "I think they do," she decided. "That one looks genuinely annoyed." He looked down at her. 6 years old, her coat the color of a plum, her small boots making clean prints in the thin remaining snow. She was pointing at a goose that had stopped to regard a smaller goose with what did in fact appear to be a considered position on the matter. He thought, I would do all of it again, every single day, for exactly this. And he understood, in the quiet way understanding sometimes arrives, not with a specific moment of revelation, but simply settling, that the marriage was not the point. The marriage had been the container. What was real was standing beside him in a plum coat with opinions about goose emotions. That had always been real. That was always going to be his. After the divorce was finalized in March, Desmond came home from the job site that evening and made spaghetti. Jalen ate 2 bowls and argued, at some length and with genuine philosophical commitment, that the 3rd bowl should not count against his vegetable requirement. Faith arranged her leftover noodles on her plate into a shape she described as a horse, which looked considerably more like a question mark, and she held firm on the horse interpretation when challenged. It was a completely ordinary evening. It was the most ordinary evening Desmond could remember having in 2 years. And he felt the ordinariness of it the way you feel sunlight after a long time indoors. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just warm and steady and correct. The spaghetti was just spaghetti. The kids were just being kids. And for the first time in a long time, that was not a consolation prize. It was the whole thing. Marcus came over that weekend. They sat on the porch on Saddle Rock Drive with coffee, watching the kids in the backyard attempt to build something from the last of the season's snow. It was not going well structurally. Jalen had a system. Faith had a competing proposal involving turrets. The negotiation was ongoing and showed no signs of resolution. "You doing all right?" Marcus said. "Yeah," Desmond said. He meant it. After a while, he said, "I keep thinking about something she said on that recording, that I probably did have a good marriage." He watched Faith successfully argue Jalen into accepting the turret plan. And she was right. I had the version I believed in. That was real to me. She just wasn't in it the way I thought. "So what do you do with that?" Marcus said. "I grieve what I thought I had," Desmond said, "without carrying anger for the person who wasn't there. Those are 2 separate losses. You can't heal them the same way." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's a hard thing to learn." "Yeah," Desmond said, "it is." They drank their coffee. In the backyard, Faith announced that the structure was now officially a castle and that she was the architect, and therefore did not have to stand outside in the cold. Jalen pointed out that wasn't how castles worked. Faith said she was revising the rules. But the final piece, the piece that changes how you understand Desmond Reed from the very beginning, hadn't come yet. And when it did, it arrived in the quietest possible way. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, on a Saturday evening, while Jalen and Faith were at a birthday party 3 streets over, Desmond sat alone in the kitchen on Saddle Rock Drive. Same quiet, same coffee. The snow was gone. The mountains were still there at the western edge of the sky, exactly where they always were, holding their position the way they always did, without needing anyone to acknowledge them for it. He had been sitting with grace, not with anger. He had been through the anger, 3 clean days of it, sharp and entirely legitimate, and it had done what anger does when you stop feeding it. It dissolved and left something more honest in its place. What he'd been sitting with was this. Grace had heard her daughter describe a detailed plan to falsely accuse an innocent man, to use his own children as leverage in a custody case built on manufactured evidence. And Grace had raised one quiet objection. Then she had gone silent for over 2 years. The answer to that, the honest one, is not indifference. It is a specific kind of fear, the fear of losing access to the people you love most. Destiny had made the threat explicit on the recording. I will move, and you will never see those babies again. Grace's silence was not a passive choice. It was silence under coercion. The silence of a woman who believed, perhaps correctly, that speaking would cost her her grandchildren. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. And there is a difference between those 2 things. Understanding the why doesn't require forgiving it. It simply releases you from having to carry the mystery. He wasn't ready to forgive Grace, but understanding came first. Marcus mentioned it almost as an aside one afternoon, a few weeks after the finalization. Grace called Patricia's office, he said, twice. Tuesday of last week, Thursday of this one. Didn't leave a message either time. Stayed on the line for about 20 seconds, then hung up. Desmond was quiet. She knew, Marcus said, not as a question. She knew, Desmond said. He didn't call her back. He'd held the idea up to the light and turned it over. But there was nothing to say that wouldn't cost both of them more than it would give. Grace would carry what she carried. That was its own kind of consequence, the kind that doesn't arrive all at once, but accumulates, quietly, over time. He set it down and left it there. That same week, a text came in from his site foreman, Jerome, at 9:17 in the evening. Desmond, got a call today from a developer out of Greenwood Village. Name's Carmichael. Said he heard about the Arkins court renovation from the Community Accountability Board that reviewed the fraud case. Wants to talk about a mixed-use project on Alameda Avenue. Could be the biggest contract we've ever bid. Desmond read it twice. Set the phone face down on the counter. Walked down the hall. Checked on Jalen. Asleep on his stomach, one arm hanging comfortably off the side of the bed. Entirely confident in the physics of his own rest. Checked on Faith, curled tight under her butterfly print blanket, breathing slow and even. He stood in the hallway between their two rooms for a moment. The world had quietly registered what he had built. His integrity, his work, the choice he had made every day to be exactly who he said he was. He hadn't needed it to, but it was good to know it anyway. He went back to the living room and sat down on the couch. Picked up his book. Didn't read much of it. Jalen came in after a while and took up residence on one side of him without asking. Faith climbed up on the other, tucked her feet under his leg, and was asleep again within minutes. Desmond didn't make it much further past his page. Outside, the Colorado night was the kind of clear that doesn't happen everywhere. Deep and still and full of stars. The sky so open it made the distance between you and everything else feel both enormous and entirely manageable. The mountains held the western edge of the dark. Patient, immovable, entirely indifferent to the particular dramas of any given human life, which Desmond had come to understand was genuinely one of their best qualities. Inside, a man who had been quietly preparing for a long time was finally, for the first time in years, simply resting. Not waiting for the next move, not building a case, not listening for footsteps in the hallway. Just resting. With his daughter's feet tucked under his leg and his son's shoulder against his arm, in a house that was his, in a life that was becoming, slowly, on its own terms, something he recognized as good. This story teaches us that the most dangerous mistake a person can make is to confuse a quiet man with a passive one. Patience is not surrender. Silence is not weakness. And trusting someone completely, only to have that trust used against you, does not make you a fool. It makes you a human being who extended more than you were owed. That is not a flaw to be ashamed of. It is a capacity to be protected. This story doesn't teach us to be suspicious of the people we love. It teaches us something quieter and more useful than that. It teaches us to know the difference between a person who is with you and a person who is simply near you. Those are not the same thing. One shows up in the small moments, the lopsided birthday cake, the child handed a pillow without being asked, the hand reached for in a dark movie theater. The other performs those moments when an audience is present and files them away for later use. Pay attention to the small moments. They are where the truth lives. And if you have ever stayed loyal, stayed present, stayed decent in a situation that did not deserve your decency, that was not weakness. That was the strongest thing in the room.
The people watching, even the ones who said nothing, knew exactly what they were witnessing.
So did you. The soul of these stories comes from human experience, empathy, and courage. AI assisted only in language refinement, so that timeless lessons of justice, compassion, and standing up against wrong could move and educate viewers everywhere.
Production team, story and screenplay by Quinn Fung.
Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.